All right, we just learned the winning line here and the winning combination. But there are still a few details that I would like you to pay attention to, which I find extremely important in the game over the board. So you can see the 4 factors that contributed to the existence of this combination. I'm going to ask you, starting from here, from time to time use a little bit of imagination. Sometimes I would help you with exact positions that I have in mind, but what I mean, sometimes I would ask you to imagine the position is slightly different and still try to understand what is going on. So what we will do now is the following. We're going to check what would happen if you remove one of the signs, right? If that sign didn't exist. So let's start with the queen. Let's assume the queen is protected. You can use your imagination, or you can just we can just put like a, I don't know, bishop on g6 for black that is protecting the queen, and we can put white bishop somewhere, I don't know, on a2 or something. So imagine the queen is protected. What would happen then in the same combination? White would try bishop b8. Black would, for example, take the rook, and then black would take the bishop, win the bishop, stops the mate, and since the queen is protected by imaginary or unimaginary defender, let's say bishop from g6, white would just lose the bishop, right? So the combination would fail and there would be nothing. So removing this factor, the combination does not exist. What about the loose piece on e8? How can it be not loose? It either has 2 defenders or 0 attackers. If it has 0 attackers, well, there's not much to talk about. But if it has 2 defenders, let's say bishop is standing on d7. It's actually difficult to come up with a move like... if the rook is protected one more time, here I'm going to ask you to use your imagination. We have to adjust the position significantly to make it work, so use your imagination. Let's say the rook has 2 defenders. Then the move bishop to b8 is just silly. Just take the queen, you take my rook, and I'm using that imaginary defender to recapture, and white loses the whole queen, right? So let's remove the factor, the rook on a8. Let's say the rook on a8 is once protected. Say the knight is on b6. Could very well be, right? We put the knight on b6, we put white's knight on b3 or something. What would happen then? Again, there would be no combination, although this is not that obvious. Bishop b8 would still be an interesting move to play, because rook is still hanging on e8. After rook e1, there are still 2 threats, rook to e8 mate and queen to f5, but black can play, say, queen d7, and that imaginary defender, say, from b6 is protecting the rook, and the game just continues. White is not winning material. Unlike in this situation, we win the rook. If there's a defender, white doesn't win a rook, the whole combination does not exist. It's just a nice move to play bishop b8, not more than that. And last but not the least, the king. There are actually 2 problems with the king. Ability to give a check and ability to threaten checkmate. In this case, they are 2 in 1. In this case, check would be a checkmate. So imagine the pawn is on h6. Small, tiny difference, huge repercussions for white. If the pawn is on h6, you probably already guessed what would happen. Bishop e8 would be a terrible mistake. I just take the rook and take the queen, and rook e8 does not come with the mate because the king can run away. So to summarize this particular position, there are 4 factors, even 5, ability to give a check and ability to threaten checkmate, but all right. There are 4 factors that contributed to the existence of this combination. Removing one of them would make the whole combination impossible. Actually, chess tactics is quite rare. Lots of things has to be wrong with the position for a combination to appear. That is why I find it extremely important to, at least occasionally, keep this list of what is wrong with your opponent's position. And, well, next level would be asking the question, what is wrong from tactical point of view with my position? So, what is wrong with black's position? You can see there are 4 signals. So you just keep the list somewhere in the back of your mind. Okay, that piece is not protected. Note it. That piece is semi-protected. Okay, note it, etc. But you should do the same for yourself as well. You don't want to be on the receiving end of a move bishop to b8, right? So how do you make sure you don't blunder? You should ask the same tough questions about your position. What is wrong with white's position? You can say queen on f3 is undefended. That's a problem, because, for example, g5 would be now a big threat. Well, white can save the game, but still. Pawn on b2 is just hanging. Rook on e1 is loose. It is once attacked, once protected, and white's king is exposed to checks. White also has some sort of problems. But here, back rank problem won against everything for black. So, approximate algorithm of finding a chess combination, I suggest the following. Number one, find all the signs. Number one sign, unprotected piece. Number two sign, semi-protected, semi-defended piece. Number three, ability to give a check. Number four, ability to threaten checkmate. There are more signs than that, but I learned from personal experience, from solving hundreds and thousands of puzzles, that these are the most common ones that happen. You point out all those signs and then they help you find candidate moves. So when you pointed out all those signs, then you should consider forcing moves. Forcing moves. What is a forcing move? It's a capture, it's a threat, it's a check, it's a checkmate threat. Do you see anything in common with the signs? Well, they are tied together. If there's a loose piece, consider attacking it. If there's a semi-protected piece, consider attacking it or taking it or removing the defender. If there's a king, consider a check. If there's king is exposed to checkmate threats, consider creating a checkmate threat. So what would be the list here of forcing moves for white? Well, there's lots of moves available here for white. Rook e8, number one. Queen c6, attacking here and there, number two. There are more forcing moves like g4, but they do not really make sense. They don't use all the signs. They just attack one queen, actually, regardless it being protected or not. So that's not the move to play in this position. So this is the approximate algorithm that you can use. Identify all the signs and then consider forcing moves that will use the most signs as possible. Usually it's a combination of signs that make a combination possible. It is quite rare that this is just one sign, you attack it and you win it, although that happens as well. I'll see you in the next. All right. Using the following example, I can show you an approximate algorithm of how to find chess combination. It's black to move here, but we are on the white side. That's usually the premise. Black to move and win some material. If you take a quick glance at this position, it seems like white is just 2 pawns up. But in fact, black can win a significant amount of material using tactics. So, what are the problems in white's position from tactical point of view? Number one, undefended, unprotected pieces. Bishop on b6, pawn on b2, rook on a1, rook on h1, pawn on g2. With time it would be much faster for you to see it almost instantaneously. It just takes practice. What about semi-protected pieces? Well, the pawn on e4, once attacked, once defended, right? And the pawn on a2, once attacked, once defended. That's pretty much it. Ability to give a check, none. Ability to check, threaten checkmate, of course not. It's an endgame. Right? So only loose pieces. So, but there's still, you can see a lot of circles, right? There's lots of pieces being undefended or poorly defended in white's position. So now what forcing moves do black have? Usually the list of forcing moves is very long. Like, for example, technically speaking, rook a2 is a forcing move. But rook takes a2 is a forcing move. It just doesn't make any sense to give up the rook, right? So here I don't have the 100% recipe. I call it common sense forcing moves, like which moves make sense when you look at them and consider them. There are not too many, like you can attack this bishop using the king or the rook, but just attacking a piece, this is just one threat that is easily refuted. Usually you need 2 or more threats. So here you have to use the typical pattern of bishop trapping the rook in the corner. So you can see that your knight, by the way, that's another signal, another sign much less common that I didn't refer previously. Your piece is in the way of winning material. It is not that common, but extremely useful to point out. Your own piece, the knight on f6, is in the way of winning a significant amount of material. If you remove the knight, bishop takes the pawn and then takes the rook. That's like what, 6 points, 6 pawns right on the spot for free, basically. So naturally you would want to consider jumping with the knight, especially if you can take, what is happening with my chess base? Knight takes e4 should come to mind, and if f takes e4, bishop takes b2, black does win material. The problem is, chess is not checkers, and white is not obliged to take the knight. White has several ways to save the rook. For example, knight goes to d2, and the rook can just freely go to d1, and in fact, black may be in trouble here. But then, luckily, you'll consider move knight to d5. It is attacking the bishop, and it is attacking the pawn on b2. The problem with knight takes e4, it created just one threat. Usually refuting one threat is not a big deal. Refuting 2 or more is usually extremely difficult. So knight to d5, double attack. Well, 2 pieces attacking at once, that's not technically double attack, but that's fine. And that's it. If white saves the bishop, say bishop to f2, black just takes the pawn. So saving the bishop doesn't make sense. You should take that knight, right? And now bishop takes b2, and now this rook has no place to go, no one can protect it, and black would just win the whole rook for free. Like if white tries to save the rook, black just takes it. And if we calculate how many points did black lose? 3, the knight. How many did black gain? 6, rook and the pawn. Black won a lot of material. So let's come back to original position. What made this combination possible? In retrospect, you never know in advance, right? But just pointing out in retrospect makes you understand chess on a much deeper level. The bishop on b6 was undefended, the pawn on b2 was undefended, and, which is very critical, rook on a1 was undefended. Removing one of these signs makes combination impossible. If the bishop was defended on b6, I don't know, use your imagination. A pawn on a5, an extra pawn on a5, I don't know. So after a move like knight d5, white can handle, there's no knight b6 threat because it is supposedly protected. We can handle this threat just by moving the knight, for example, to d2. That would save the rook, and the bishop allegedly is protected. So if the pawn was on b2 was defended, nothing to talk about, right? The knight would be just lost. And, which is very critical, knight to d5, e takes d5, bishop takes b2. If the rook was defended, let's say another knight was standing on c2, actually black wouldn't win anything. Black would lose 2 pieces for rook and the pawn, which is approximately equal, if not even worse. Usually 2 pieces are better than rook and the pawn. So the fact that the rook was not defended significantly contributed, and without that the combination wouldn't be possible. And actually here we turn to another not very typical sign. It is typical but very rare. When the piece is extremely restricted in its movement. It's very difficult to put precise definition on this one, but that's what contributed as well. If a piece can barely move or has no moves, it is very vulnerable. If that rook could have moved, nothing would have happened. So here we have 3 factors, 3 direct factors that contributed, 3 undefended pieces. Unobvious factors and less common but not less important. Your piece was in the way of winning material, which you can use for discovered attack, discovered checks, and all kinds of tactical patterns like that. And last but not the least, the piece couldn't move or could barely move. That's of your opponent, of course. That's a huge sign that contributed to this one. Now let's take a look at the following brilliant combination for white. White to move and win. I don't give any hints. Try to solve it yourself. White to move and win. Let's point out the signs of possible combination. Undefended pieces in black's position. Let's start with the most valuable, the queen. Then the knight. And the pawn on b7. That's it, right? 3 pieces being undefended. Next one, semi-protected or semi-defended pieces. The pieces that are once attacked and once defended. That's a pawn on d5, right there. And pawn on g7, right there. Correct? Correct. No more semi-protected pieces. Ability to give a check. Yes, plenty. The knight can give a check, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Knight can give a check. The queen can give a check. So the king is exposed to checks on g8. Ability to threaten checkmate. Yes, white can threaten checkmate. For example, if the queen comes to d4, then it can come to g7. Or for example, knight takes e7 would be almost a checkmate because of backrank problem. So these are the factors. Let's consider some forcing moves that create at least 2 threats at once. Like moves like h3 are easily refuted. The knight can jump anywhere, like knight f2 fork immediately or move away. One move threats are easily handleable. What else can white do? White can use the queen. Let's just pick all the pieces. Take the queen. What forcing moves the queen has? It has queen a4, but it's just one threat. White has queen d4 and queen d5, 2 forcing moves. There are checks with the knight, knight to e7. You should consider it for a brief second, but after queen e7, you just refute it. But then hopefully you'll realize that if queen doesn't take, king has to move to h8 and white wins with the mate. King h8. White wins with the mate. Aha, okay, so the queen on c5, if we remove it, that would be great. So maybe you'll consider a move like b4 or something. But that's just creating one threat, black can handle it. The winning line goes the following. It's queen to d4. Lots of people, when solving this position, make the following mistake. They see that knight e7 would be a win, because if the queen is moved away, so naturally they want to remove the queen with a tempo. Queen takes d5. It's a typical pattern. You take on d5, then you give a check. However, the small problem is white forgot about problems in his own position. Queen takes d5 comes with a check to the king. That would be great. Knight e7 would win the game. Fortunately, that's illegal. So do not forget about your own problems. And what is the problem in white's position? The king is exposed to checks. All kinds of checks. A fork from f2 is coming. Knight on f5 is semi-protected, right? So white doesn't, it's not like white has no problems. It's just black has more. The winning line goes queen to d4. White creates 3 threats at the same time. Attacking the queen, attacking the knight, and attacking the pawn. So, of course, the main line is queen takes d4, knight to e7 check, king h8 only move, rook takes f8 mate. So what else can black try to do? Black can try to save his queen and save the g7 mate. How can black do that? Black can go queen to c7, right? Protecting the problem on g7. The problem with that defense is that white wins the whole night. What else can black do? Black can try to do an intermediate move. Rook takes f5, recapture. By the way, a forcing move that you must consider. For example, if white had a pawn on g2, that would be a major problem because white has a backrank problem. Or even if white's pawn was on h3. But after queen takes c5, rook takes f1 check, king g2, white wins significant amount of material. The rook is hanging, this is hanging, the check is coming, black's position is collapsing. So that's pretty much it. That is the solution to this puzzle. And as with the starting position, I want to point out the following. Which signs contributed from the starting position? The queen, the knight, the pawn, and the king, right? 4 signs. Removing one sign would make the whole combination impossible. Imagine black has a pawn on b6 in the starting position. I'm going to again ask you to use your imagination. I'm not going to adjust the position. b6. Let's say the pawn is on b6, right? So the queen is protected. It seems like not a big deal, a queen being protected. It is a big deal. If the queen is protected after queen d4, black can simply go knight f6, save the knight, save from mate, and after queen takes c5, well, black can recapture and the game just continues. So removing this factor, combination, well, does not win. Wouldn't be fair to say does not work. It's not winning. What else? If we remove this one, if g7 pawn was one more time protected, I don't know, with a knight from e8 or something, then queen g7 wouldn't be a big problem. A move like queen d4 actually would be difficult to handle, because even if g7 pawn is not hanging, the knight and the queen still are hanging. Black can try something like queen c4 to protect them, but knight e7 would still win. So maybe here I'm not sure how black would have handled even this double attack without the g7 pawn. But with the g7 pawn, it's just overwhelming for sure. So what else? If the knight on g4 was protected, if we add one more pawn to h5, let's say, queen d4, queen c7, and white does not win the knight, white just keeps attacking and the game continues. Last but not the least, if the king was not exposed to checks, there would be nothing to talk about. Like we just take the queen, right? If knight e7 doesn't come with a check, let's say king is on h8, there's nothing to talk about. There's no checkmate threat. No knight cannot give a check to the king. So only these all factors together contributed to the existence of this combination. So make sure to keep this lit. It could be difficult at the beginning, you know. With time, now it takes me like a second. I briefly, if I have a tactical puzzle, I quickly screen the whole position, all these signs, and then I let my brain, my engine inside of my brain give me suggestions. But they shape your thinking in a good direction. Your brain now knows what to look for, you know, if you know exactly what are the problems in your opponent's position.
So let's keep going. White to move and win. Unprotected pieces, the bishop on f5, the rook on e8, the pawn on f7, the pawn on a7, the pawn on g7. Usually those pawns are really hard to get to. Semi-protected pieces, rook on c2. Ability to give a check, sort of. Ability to threaten checkmate, none. What forcing moves do white have? White can take the rook, but that wouldn't help. The winning line goes like this, bishop to g4. Here actually we'll learn another less common but not less important sign, alignment, that we will discuss in the section about skewers and pins. Alignment of pieces is a big deal. If these pieces were not aligned, white wouldn't win material here. So what is going on here? Bishop to g4, attacking an unprotected bishop. If black takes, we take the rook, we won and exchange approximately 2 pawns, right? If black takes our rook first, we take bishop f5 check, which is very critical. And then we recapture the rook, right? Next move is rook takes f1, rook takes c1, apologies. And white wins material. And if black tries to protect the bishop, black loses the whole rook, right? So what contributed here? So pawn on a7 did not, f7, g7, e8 did not contribute. Contribute the rook on c2, the bishop on f5, and the king on c8 being exposed to checks, and one last common sign, but not less important, alignment. Alignment of this and alignment of this. That's what made this combination possible. Next position, white to move and win. Unprotected pieces in black's position. If you feel like I'm going too fast, please pause the video and try to solve it on your own. Unprotected pieces, pawn on h6, if anyone cares, and rook on c7. That's it. Semi-protected pieces, knight on d7. That's 2 attackers, 2 defenders. That's actually quite a loose piece. Ability to give a check, yes, rook takes d7 comes with a check. Ability to threaten checkmate, none. What forcing moves do white have? Well, white has obvious captures on d7. What else? It doesn't seem like white has anything else. The position seems quiet.
But if you point out that these two pieces are very loose, in fact, I believe that
semi-protected piece is even, may I say, more loose than unprotected piece. Because if there is a semi-protected piece, how can you win it? You either attack it one more time and take it, or you remove the defender, you can take the defender first, or you can intervene with the defensive mechanism, like if the rook is protecting on the distance, you can put a piece in between those two pieces, right? So there are many ways to win semi-protected piece. The only way to win a loose piece, unprotected piece, is just attack and take it. So in fact, semi-protected pieces are easier to win than just unprotected pieces. Although they usually say watch out for unprotected pieces, semi-protected pieces are even in bigger danger since there are much more ways to win them. The winning move goes rook to c4. So what happens here? Attacking unprotected piece. If black takes our rook, we take on d7 with a check, because we noted that we can give a check, king moves and we recapture, we win the whole piece, right? So what else can black do? Black can try to protect the rook with rook b to c8. The problem now is the alignment of heavy pieces. White takes on d7 with a check, black recaptures, and we win that rook behind that rook on c8. And white won a piece again. What else can black do? Black can try going knight c5, right? Seemingly saving two pieces at the same time. So this one is much more sophisticated tactics. But in order just to consider rook c4, you have to see all those sides. So keep going, keep making the forcing moves. b4 is the forcing move because there's a pin, that rook is still undefended. So the only way to try to not lose the knight is to go knight to e6, and actually white has two ways to win material here. We can take, and give a check, again using the sign of ability to give a check, or we can recapture like this, and if black takes, we take. White win the full piece in this particular example. Next position. White to move and win some material. Unprotected pieces. c7, g7, h8, a8, e4. Semi-protected pieces. Just the f7. Ability to give a check. Yes. Bishop takes f7 comes with a check. Ability to threaten checkmate. That's usually not the case in the endgame. What can white do? Bishop takes f7 check. That's a typical pattern. King takes f7, knight to g5, yet another check. King moves and white wins the loose piece on e4. White won only a pawn, but that should be good enough for a win eventually. So what has contributed here? So I'm gonna remove the sides that did not contribute. Three signs contribute. Removing one of them would make the combination impossible. If black rook was on f8, pawn on f7 wouldn't be loose, there would be no combination. If bishop on e4 wasn't loose, let's say knight was on f6, the combination wouldn't be possible. There would be no loose piece, white would just lose material. And what is extremely important right now, if black's king was on e7 in this position, it wouldn't be exposed to checks, and the combination would fail yet again, because bishop takes f7, imagine the king on e7. This isn't checkers. Well, in this particular case, you can choose. Black would have time to recapture the knight on f3 with a check, and then take our bishop. So three factors contributed in a seemingly quiet position. But if you see 1, 2, 3, you consider forcing moves. Maybe number one forcing move to consider would be knight to g5. I can give you that maybe. Double attack or a fork. But black has several ways to handle. Black can just take a pawn on g2 if they want, or come back to g6 and handle two threats. But bishop takes f7 wins the pawn due to check and due to fork that is coming, due to unprotectedness of the bishop on e4. Next position and last in the easy section, Forgive me if you don't find it easy. The harder one is coming. I'll be there to explain it, and hopefully you'll become a much better player after this. White to move and win material. White to move and win material. Loose pieces. Pawn on c6, if anyone cares. Semi-protected pieces. Only the bishop on a6, right? This one's attacked. Let's defend it. Ability to give a check. Yes, the king is very vulnerable to checks. It is vulnerable on this diagonal. It is vulnerable to all kinds of knight checks, right? Ability to threaten checkmate. Well, not really, not yet. So 1, 2, 3. Forcing moves for white. Once you spot this diagonal, you should want to put a piece there, because discover check is a huge deal. Discover check is really difficult to handle. The winning combination goes like this. Rook takes a6, knight takes a6. This is the beauty of semi-protected pieces in your opponent's position. Once you make the capture, that piece becomes unprotected. That's one way to win it, and then you attack it and win it. Or you can distract the defender. Or you can intervene with the, like in the very first puzzle at the beginning of the course. Bishop to b8 intervened with the defensive mechanism on back rank. So you can either remove the defender or put a piece between two pieces, or make another attacker, create another attack. So you have three ways, maybe I missed even one, to win a semi-protected pieces. Whether to win an unprotected piece, like in this case a knight on a6, the only way to win it is attack and take it. And the winning move goes queen to d3. White attacks the knight, simultaneously creating an enormous threat to the king of double check and mate to follow. An example would be knight a to b4, seemingly saving the knight with a tempo, but double check, knight to f6, huge deal. The only way to run away from double check, you cannot take any of the checkers because there are two of them. The only way to escape double check is to move your king. The only legal square is king h8, and queen h7 gets to the king. So black cannot do that. In fact, black has to move the king or protect the file, and white wins the knight on a6, and white won quite a significant amount of material while still attacking black's position.
So, looks like an ordinary position, right? White to move, nothing is happening, nothing is hanging. Just play an ordinary move. In fact, white has a crushing win here. And it seems like it comes out of the blue, out of nowhere. So here comes the win. Bishop to b8. What kind of move is that? Who plays chess like this? You know, leave your queen unprotected, put a bishop on a square that is twice attacked? What is this? Who plays chess like this? Well, strong players do if they see the signals that position gives them that trigger the combination. Bishop to b8. Let's take a closer look. What is happening? The queen is indeed hanging, but if queen takes f3, rook takes e8, checkmate. Back rank problem. Black has a big back rank problem. Alright, but black can take on e1 with a check first, right? Rook takes e1 and rook takes e1. But now again, taking the queen leads to mate again. White wins, because we managed to block this rook from controlling the back rank. Alright, what else can black do? The queen is hanging and the mate is coming. You know, you can save the mate by taking the bishop, but then you lose the queen. You may move the queen, say to d7 to stop the mate, but then you lose what? The rook on a8 is being lost and white wins material. And that is pretty much it. That is pretty much the whole combination. There's nothing black can do in this position except lose the whole rook or even the queen or get checkmated. There is no way to save this position by this brilliant move bishop to b8. Under normal circumstances, moves like bishop b8 are terrible. You lose the queen, you lose the bishop. What kind of move is that? Why on earth would you ever consider a move like that? That is very often the problem in finding the combination. Very often it is difficult even to consider the winning move. And sometimes that is the case. The second you consider it, you understand that this is winning. So this is a winning combination. Bishop takes b8. Best thing for black to do is to take the rook, but then mate is coming anyway, and black loses either the queen or the rook, or black is being checkmated. That's it, white is winning. So why on earth did this combination appear? Black's position looks so normal. You know, you have two rooks standing on back rank, you have a queen pinning the bishop, which is good. You have a good bishop here, which is attacking the pawn. Black's position looks very okay. In fact, white's position doesn't look that good. The pawn on b2 is hanging, bishop on g4 is pinned, you know, like g5 is coming. You know, black's position looks fine, but bishop b8 and white is winning. So throughout the course, you would learn what to look for, to see, to get this inner feeling. I'm lucky to have this inner feeling. Whenever I see a position, I get this inner feeling, hey, look for a combination. Something's not right about that. And students kept asking me like, but what is not right? How do you tell? How do you get this feeling? Well, I developed this feeling by just solving thousands and thousands of puzzles, and it just naturally came to life. But then when students started asking, I started to try to use the logical scientific approach and to say exactly what triggered the combination. So we'll consider this position deeper in the next video, but briefly, this is what triggered the combination. Number one, unprotected pieces. In this case, the queen on f5 is unprotected. That is number one. Number two, what I call semi-protected or semi-defended pieces. What is that? That is the piece that is once attacked and once defended. We're not going to consider cases where the piece is just hanging and you can just take it. I'm assuming that is easy. So we're going to consider cases where the piece is once attacked and once defended. So like rook on e8, right? It is once attacked and once defended. It is fine for now, but that is not safe. So semi-protected pieces. Rook on e8 is once attacked, once defended, and the same applies to rook on a8, which is also very important to the existence of this combination. It is once attacked and once defended, right? But that's still not it, not all. And the last but not the least, black's king. Specifically, 2 points. One, ability to give a check. White can give a check right away. Rook takes e8, right? So ability to give a check is a huge sign. And the fourth sign is ability to threaten checkmate. Black has severe back rank problems. So for example, a move like, say, queen c6 would threaten checkmate in 1 or 2, right? Rook takes e8 would be a big threat, but black can handle this. So 4 things contributed to the existence of this combination. Hanging piece, queen on f5. Loose piece, rook on e8, rook on a8. Well, we can call it, like, we can actually summarize it in 2 factors, loose pieces and the king. Loose pieces consist of 2 factors, undefended pieces, which is queen on f5, and semi-defended or semi-protected pieces, rook on e8, rook on a8. So these are the loose pieces in black's position. And another factor is the king, ability to give a check and ability to threaten checkmate. All of this contributed to the existence of this combination. In the next video, we'll discuss a little closer, subtle details that are not obvious at all. See you in the next video.